Well, good evening, everyone. At least evening here in Europe, and we're continuing, according to the most accurate count, of which I do not seem to be capable, the 32nd program of a treatise on cosmic fire and in depth. As much depth as we can possibly bring to it. This is a book that DK tells us is a very advanced book, but it gives us the opportunity to survey the whole of the teaching which he offered, and that in itself is of great value when we're trying to see what the synthesis of all of these relations may be. This is a book that is written on the third ray and the first ray, the Tibetan tells us, and the 5-volume set of a treatise on the 7 rays, you know, the 2 psychology books, astrology, esoteric healing, rays and the initiations, they are all written on the second ray and particularly appeal to the evocation of consciousness. I'd like to welcome you here. You know, we're all functioning at different times, and sometimes it's just easier not to be up in the middle of the night and to wait until the next one. And then perhaps, you know, pick up the program on Makara, if you like to do that, and increasingly on YouTube. So, you know, welcoming Michael here, whose function is very necessary, and so hi Anne and Annette and Brennan and Karsten, Catherine, and looks like Donald. So hello, Donald, and Ishtar, and Jesse, and Joan, and Johi, Karen, Kate, Margot, and Martine, and Noeline. Let's see if I can get this straight. We have, looks like Harry. Some of you are relatively new to the process, it seems. Risto, and Vicky, and Yvonne, and Zenaidi. Welcome to all of you. And we'll see if we can dig into these foundational matters which have a lot to do with, at first, fire by friction. The great majority of the book is written about solar fire, and maybe 1,000 of the pages are about solar fire, with a little bit of a preamble regarding cosmic fire by friction, and a little bit at the end regarding a fire that we don't have yet too much to do with, and that is the true electric fire. So basically, you know, this is a book on the middle principle. I'd like also to, I would like to have us think about the second great invocation, and those who would like to say it together, to do so, you know, with, of course, you'll be on mute. But these are critical times in the world, and even though we are dealing with the great stratosphere of life, we're dealing with very high issues, and issues that are not easily understood because they are so foundational, so material and substantial. Even though that is the case, we want to do what we can to bring in the will to good and the cessation of evil on our planet. Let the lords of liberation issue forth. Let them bring succor to the sons of men. Let the rider from the secret place come forth, and coming save. Come forth, O Mighty One. Let the souls of men awaken to the light, and may they stand with massed intent. Let the fiat of the Lord go forth. The end of woe has come. Come forth, O Mighty One. The hour of service of the saving force has now arrived. Let it be spread abroad, O Mighty One. Let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. The will to save is here. The love to carry forth the work is widely spread abroad. The active aid of all who know the truth is also here. Come forth, O Mighty One, and blend these three. Construct a great defending wall. The rule of evil now must end. Oh. So we will be using that rather more frequently for the next few months when so many decisions about democracy or dictatorship are in the wind. And this seems to be well, you know, even when we study cosmic fire, it's all part of the new school curriculum, especially eventually for the advanced schools that study the macrocosm. And these schools are meant to help bring the Christ and his energy, the energy of hierarchy, closer to humanity, and humanity closer to them. So our studies have to do with facilitating the externalization of the hierarchy, preparing us to understand in greater depth the ageless wisdom, and helping us understand the education which must be imparted to the people in general. And now, of course, as DK says, it will be a long time before humanity is really ready for occultism, humanity in general. But there are ways of explaining things which are helpful and which help human beings express a more esoterically real understanding of the true nature of ourselves and the world in which we live. And there we can do a lot of good if we are trained properly to do that good. So getting the big picture, shall we say, and you know, cosmic fire is wonderful for the big picture, but also for all the many details that DK expanded in the form of other books, of which we know there are so many to study in depth the root of so many books: psychology, astrology, healing, initiation, um, magic, all those and more are found as seeds within this great book, which has in it also a lot of cosmology and an understanding of the many layered universe in which we live. I think we're getting quite near the end of this particular section of commentary. It's footnote number 12, and it says the quaternary is composed of the 4 lower principles and the sheaths through which they manifest as a coherent unit, being held together during manifestation by the life force of the indwelling entity. Life force, we can associate that a lot with the will to exist, the will to be. And interestingly, there are places in these books where DK says, well, yes, magnetism is related to the attractive second ray, but even more so to the powerful first ray. It has its own type of magnetism, this life force of which we're which we are focusing upon. And one of the examples of an area in the, let's say, in the human energy system, which we will soon be studying, is that you have the etheric sheath, which is sometimes, I think strangely, called a principle. But at the same time, you have the principle of prana that works through it. And of course, you have the astral body and the principle of kama, or desire, or sentiency, whatever you want to call it, sensitivity, so closely connected with the nervous system. And you have the matter of the lower mind, but what is the principle of lower manas. And maybe we even want to include the causal body. I think it's called Karana Sarira in the Sanskrit. This causal body, or egoic lotus, and the principle involved there is an aspect of higher manas. Now, as I've said before, this book gives a lot of different perspectives, and if you turn to, well, you know, I've often said if you turn to, but what I might maybe do is back up my words with some kind of little illustration. A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, page, I think 259, maybe. And it starts to talk about what are the Manasaputras, you know, the mind-born sons. And before you know it, we start to have different ways of looking at the principles of man. Right in front of us is one way. Now we'll get there, you know. That's one way of looking, monad, Atma-Buddhi Manas, and the body egoic. Sometimes he mixes these things, principles and sheaths, and you don't exactly know what he's talking about, but, you know, here is at least Manas, the 5th principle.
Michael, did you want to show that page in Cosmic Fire?
Yeah, sure should do that. That was my whole point, wasn't it? Thanks for catching me on that. Yeah, well, here it is. So this is one way of looking at principles, but it's not alone. Here's a very high way of looking at principles. Monad as the pure spirit, the one and only, and then the monadic principle of Atma, or spiritual will, Buddhi, or the Christ principle, Manas, or the higher mind. And then we have something that looks like a vehicle, but it's called a principle, namely the causal body on the higher mental plane, where a master can look and see just how far we have progressed. And here is that interesting thing that I've been talking about. The lower quaternary, he's basically only really showing us one principle there. The rest are vehicles. So he does mix them up a bit. And here's another way to look at the principles. You know, so obviously this is a whole unit of study. How do the seven come out of the one and animate in different ways the vehicles of the one? You know, every vehicle we've got is a monadic vehicle, really. It all came from the monad, and the types of energies and powers, which principles are working through these different vehicles. And, you know, you number them differently, and, you know, he calls Buddhi, he doesn't call it love wisdom, here he calls it pure reason. And, you know, it goes all the way down to the seventh principle, which no longer includes the prana. He stops because this is a different way of numbering it. So he makes kama manas, or feeling toned mind, into a principle. And the seventh principle is kama, or a pure feeling. And we don't even get to the point where we usually do, where we're talking about prana. And this, you know, so anyway, you get the idea. And this goes on for about 10 pages. All this numbering and renumbering of the principles. Upside down, right side up, and principles as seen from the point of view of man, but principles as seen from the point of view of the ego, which doesn't go any higher than Atma. So you see subjectivity, objectivity, and you see how it relates to a heavenly man. And here's yet another numbering which counts the dense physical body. So if you feel that you know in a very solid and unchanging way what the principles of man may be, or the principles of any of the great beings, maybe a bit more flexibility should enter the consideration, because the one thing DK is so good at is, well, the one thing, he's good at so many things, but the changing of a point of view. That's what he does. He says, from this angle, thus. From another angle, something else. From another angle, still something else. And as he changes the angles, so the enumerations and the qualities all change. So right there on page 259, and for about 10 pages or a bit more, you see the principles of man, and we will get there. It's a much more advanced teaching than what was first presented in theosophy as kind of a rigid system that's always the same. Here, everything depends on the point of view. So maybe we can just think that the sheaths are vehicles made of different types of matter, and the principles are diversified energies that work through these sheaths, through these vehicles. And they are sustained by the Sutratma, which is the life thread. They are held together by magnetic life. The first ray has control over you shall exist, you shall not exist. In other words, life and death. You will remain in existence, or you will be abstracted from existence. And the vehicles, their material nature that have been aggregated, will just fall apart until a new one is built. So the principles are like faculties. They are like abilities that we have, special energies that can do special things on different levels through vehicles which are either refined or not refined. We have to pay attention to refining our vehicles, which means, of course, that we watch what we eat. I'm thinking about the outer vehicle. We watch how we exercise. We keep the vehicle clean, we've been told. And then the faculty, the energy, the principle, which basically comes from the monad, can work more efficiently through the vehicle. And probably in any one life, each of us has a kind of focus on a particular principle. Some people may be just emerging from a lot of attention to their physical nature, and they're going to develop themselves emotionally and sentiently. That's going to be their focus, and the chakras connected with that vehicle will be predominant. Other people may find that it's time to develop the mental body. And although they may have a rich emotional body, they're going to focus on the lower mind. And the principle of manas will be operative, and then you have to learn how to keep your mental vehicle in fit shape, because any one of these vehicles can have kind of a fitness regimen connected with them. And basically, as we move along, we have to learn to keep all the vehicles in reasonably fit and integrated shape. So, it can be the microcosm, it can be the macrocosm. The 4 plus 1 are the logoic pentagram. And the 1 relates to the fire of intelligent will. Remember, we've been looking at the 5-pointed star, and we've been looking at the fact that the physical plane is divided into 2, and the mental plane is divided into 2. The astral body is not divided into 2 parts. And the highest point on the 5-pointed star has to do with the will energy. The next 2 points have to do with higher and lower mind. And a lot of us are learning now how to finally contact the higher mind and not just the concrete things of life, and that the lower 2 points on which the star rests, we might say, are the division of the physical nature into latent heat and active heat, or the internal fire and the radiatory etheric fire. So that is our quaternary, numbered one way, is our lower mind, our astral body, our etheric body, and our dense physical body. Now, as the dense physical body is refined and absorbed, as it will be progressively during the solar system, then the lower quaternary will change, and it will be the etheric body, the astral body, the astral body, the lower mind, and the higher mind. That will be a quaternary. The soul will be at the apex of the quaternary. Basically, people are pretty ignorant of the constitution of man. If you're going to ask, the average non-aspiring person, how is man composed? He might say something like, well, there's a body, there's a soul, body and soul. And that is true to a certain point, but the 7 principles and the numerous vehicles are not in the consciousness. And when they are in the consciousness, we will have a much better idea of how to progress spiritually. At one point, DK said, what you really need to know is the constitution of man and the next step ahead. Sounds pretty simple. How am I composed? What am I working on? What's going on here in all of this energy exchange? And what do I do with it? What really is my next step ahead? So I'm not just treading water or going in a circle, just exemplifying rotary motion without the spiral. And if we knew those couple of things, we would make progress. So, let's discover those factors for ourselves in relation to our own microcosm, and then start taking those next steps. Okay, so I think I've described that quaternary quite a bit. A lot of trouble with the chemic vehicle, which is the astral body, and because it's so filled with glamour or with the wrong use of desire, desiring unworthy things that don't lead you anywhere, don't lead onto the spiritual path. We have to straighten that out, and we're trying to rid ourselves of the more obvious glamours, which you can find according to your ray, your personality ray particularly, and your soul ray also, around page 120 and following of the book Glamour, A World Problem. So we have all these different ways of looking at the number 4. And basically what we have to do is make sure the triangle tilts downward into the number 4, into the square. And as I've said before, and can say it, because basically there's a branch of Masonry in which they're always holding parades and for charities and so forth. The Masonic apron is exactly that. the triangle into the square, and it creates the letter M. The soul manifests in the square. Now, a lot of us, we still have the triangle pointing upward instead of infusing, shall we say, the lower square or the quaternary. The triad has to infuse the quaternary, a lower 4 and a higher 3 coming together. Now, I've got a thought here, and we have to see whether it is correct. Planets related to the logoic quaternary of the Earth could be considered as Venus, Mars, Earth, and Pluto. And there are some non-sacred planets involved there that are covered or veiled by the sun and the moon. Note that there are 3 non-sacred planets, namely Earth is non-sacred, Mars and Pluto non-sacred. Pluto is an esoteric planet, but it is considered non-sacred, though it is remote in its activity and doesn't affect everybody. Once you're on the path, it really begins to affect you. So 3 non-sacred planets and 1 sacred Venus with a 6th ray monad. Venus is the home of the planetary logos of the 6th ray. When that term home is used, we're pretty much talking about the monadic ray. Uranus is the home of electric fire. And he tells us that the esoteric ray, that is the monadic ray of Uranus, is the first ray, shared with the Earth and maybe with Mars. There may be a possibility that Mars has a high, very high first ray connotation. Mars is, Venus is associated with the solar plexus of our solar logos. And he tells us with Kama Manus, Venus is associated with Kama Manus, which generally means when you think, you feel, when you feel, you think. It's hard to keep those two separated when we have not overcome Kama Manus. And on a higher turn of the spiral, we also find that the star Sirius, which is much represented by Venus, is also connected with some higher form of Kama Manus. Mars, I think, can be associated with the logoic sacral center. Mars rules sex. It also rules the physical body. It rules Kama. Mars is all over the place, really. Mars is the dense physical body. It's not the etheric body, but it is the astral body ruler, a major astral body ruler. It is the planet of very concrete mind, and it is the planet of the personality. So there are 5 positions: soul, lower mind, astral body, etheric body, physical body, and Mars has a lot to do with 4 of those positions. When it comes to the etheric body, we're into a different situation. Yeah, it just came to me. And there it is, Vulcan has a lot to do with the etheric body. And you note that as you go along in your progress, both at the 2nd initiation and at the 3rd initiation, Vulcan has to conquer Mars, which is another way of saying in the Bible symbolically that Cain kills Abel. Vulcan kills Abel the shepherd, the one who tends the sheep and has a more exoteric function. This is finally figured out at the third initiation, when Mars and the moon are conjuncted and the moon stands for Vulcan. Now, I realize I'm talking about a lot of diverse things, but if we use pure reason, we can relate these different items of information so that eventually an intuitive grasp of articulated reality dawns upon our consciousness. We just look and we see. And it's called straight knowledge. We may have to go through a lot of that fifth ray kind of work. This is this, I analyze it, I analyze the relations, I focus on a particular thing. But eventually, all the little items of knowledge clarify and they come together. They, I don't know if the best word is congeal, but they lock into each other and all at once. And then the intuition is at play and you just get it, you know. You have the pure reason of the Buddhic plane. Now we're all pushing to have that. We've learned how to think a little bit. We've learned maybe or are learning how to think abstractly a little bit. And now we want that pure, straight, immediate knowledge, which is the pure reason of the Buddhic plane. So, Mars, it has a lot to do with the sacral center, but also with the solar plexus center of our solar logos. And Mars really has many functions. It's connected with the base of the spine center because it rules Kundalini passive or latent, whereas Mercury rules Kundalini active. There's a number of those planets that crowd together down at the base of the spine. And when it comes to our solar logos, it's particularly the Earth. We live on a base of the spine center, and it's heating up. So a lot of what's happening in terms of the climate change is not only the thoughtlessness of man, it is partially that, but also the initiatory process of our planetary logos, which will be very, very important in helping our solar logos take his fifth initiation, and he will become really, really a cosmically sacred planet. Okay, and Pluto is connected with the base of the spine too, and the moon with the physical body. Okay, those are some planetary associations which help us determine what may be the quaternary, the vehicles and the energies of the personality of our solar logos. And from my way of thinking, these planetary gods have been with our solar logos for a long time. You know, in the same way that a human being can follow the same teacher for a number of lives, always having a more intimate relationship with the teacher. You know, Master DK is always saying, I knew you when, you know, and he's going back a few incarnations ago. You can do that with the planets in their relationship to the solar logos. They've been around, and there's a mutual relationship there. between the solar logos, who is the teacher, and the planets, who are the what's called the attendant planets. And they are the students. They form a particular group. And DK tells us Venus is in a higher group of cosmic students than is the Earth. So it does apply. This analogy applies. And there are other assignments here of the planets. And let's just say the sun can represent the entire personality. Pluto, with its helmet of invincibility, or what is it? It's a helmet of invisibility, can represent the mental body and all of the research it's capable of doing. Mars, the astral, Earth, the etheric body, and the moon, the unprincipled, dense physical. And so basically, you have to understand, we have to understand one day, what are the planets which are veiling or veiled by the sun and the moon. And then we'll have not only a quaternary, we'll have some kind of fivefold combination within our solar system. These are the non-sacred planets. I always kind of try to remember that when I look at the keyboard of a piano, and there are 5 black keys, the way it's presently arranged, and that stands for the non-sacred planets, and the 7 white keys, which stand for the sort of the major scale, and they stand for the 7 sacred planets. It's just a question of visibility, whether you have black keys or white keys. It's just to help people press the right key, and they're not all black keys. They are sometimes tan keys or some variety of yellow. Those 5 keys which are elevated somewhat on the piano. Anyway, 7 and 5. So we get into some question about numbers. It says here that the divine spark does not yet manifest, as do the other fires. I mean, we certainly have had plenty of fire by friction. We're born into it. It is, in a way, old Adam. And, in the dogma of Christianity, they talk about the unregenerate man. This is the lower irrational part, the instinctual, etheric, physical. And now we're focusing on the mind, lower mind and higher mind. And we don't yet really have, for the average disciple, the monad, with its will actually coming from the cosmic mental plane we have been learning, is not really pouring through yet. And the same is true of our non-sacred planet. The monad is esoterically inactive because this is a non-sacred planet. The masters can tell its footprints, and maybe we can too, to a certain degree. I did this once by thinking of the colors, red and green, which are complements of each other. And why is it that nature is green, but nature is red at the same time? And so the poet writes that nature is red in tooth and claw, meaning there's such a destructive part, drawing blood, which is engineered by the first ray monad, that the green of nature turns red. And that's kind of a hint of where the first ray monad of Earth is to be seen. There are probably little hints that tell us where the monad, upon what ray it is to be found, but we have to be able to read the hints. So at first now, the last solar system gave us a focus on the lower 2 points of the star. This solar system is giving us a focus on the middle 2 points of the star, and the next solar system will focus on the high and singular point which we are connecting with the will. Now here is a little tabulation which may be useful because numbers sometimes, reveal the quality of things. Let's see where we are here. I just want to, I'm not sure whether I made this up or whether it looks to me like I just kind of put this together. It's not exactly in the book, but if you gather things together from the book, you will find it to be so. So sometimes these tabulations, they help to organize the mind. In the first solar system, the number was 5. And 5 is the number of Brahma from the atomic plane on down. So if I were to, if I were to look at, let's see, yeah, that'll do it. If I were to look at the lower 5 planes, these 5 are the planes of Brahma. Okay, now notice you can, in our present solar system, we have 7 planes, and you begin to wonder whether there's some kind of completion in the number 9, which will be found in the next solar system. The number of distinct vibrational segments is not necessarily determined. I begin to wonder whether, to what extent the 7 planes were accentuated in the previous solar system. Maybe the number was principally 5, and maybe in the next solar system it will be principally 9. It's just a speculation, and one day we will know. So anyway, the number of our second solar system is 7. The number of Vishnu, or Surya. That's kind of interesting, the 7 rays, which is the second ray method of studying things, comes under this number 7. Astrology is much more complex, but I think will also be related to the number 5 and to the third ray, which is Brahma's ray. So, what's more important, the rays or astrology? They're both vitally important at this time, and they have vital interrelations which we must know. Now, if you want to study like DK studies, this intricate study of detailed unity, you've got to know the 7 rays. You have to know the 12 signs of the zodiac. You have to know the rays that come through those signs of the zodiac. You have to know the planetary rulers of each sign of the zodiac and the rays that come through those planetary rulers, and there's going to be more than one. So, you know, maybe one that's major, but every planet has more than one ray, obviously, just like a human being does. So the rays of the planets, their rulerships, um, every sign has an orthodox ruler, an esoteric ruler, and a hierarchical ruler. You have to know those. And you have to know the chakras that are connected with each one uh, of these signs and rays and planets. Um, and that itself, there's a triple thing there, you know. You look at the heart center, well, you know, it's ray 2. You know that both the sun and Jupiter are connected with it. Um, and when it comes to the heart, it is Leo that rules the heart. But from another point of view, Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces, because they give you ray 2, are connected with this ray 2 center. So, okay, well, you might say, oh, that's just too much to know. But really, DK says, look, is all this really harder than a college textbook on chemistry? You know, you maybe the chemistry book has more little parts and pieces and detail than DK's books, and yet you address yourself to them, and you say, "Yeah, I'm going to learn this." And thus it is that certain things have to be memorized. You know, in the new schools, people will have to be tested on whether they have the fundamental spiritual numerals memorized so that they can begin to play with them and understand the relations. Anyway, Shiva is the number of the third, is the god of the third solar system, just the way Vishnu Surya is the um, god of the second, and Brahma the god of the previous major solar system. Interestingly enough, the number 9 is the number you use when you want to understand the third ray. And although it's a first ray solar system, it is the third in order. So you begin to wonder how many planes will each cosmic plane have in the previous solar system. Will it always be 7, as it is now, or will it have moved 5, 7, 9? There's no reason why it might not necessarily move in that way. When it comes to the Hindu Trimurti, we have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva connected with the 3 major solar systems. Now, don't forget, we're in the 5th solar system now, but only the 2nd major. And the last solar system was really the 4th, but the 1st major. And the next solar system will be the 6th incarnation of our solar logos, but only the 3rd major. Now, when it comes to symbols for these different solar systems, we might look at the triangle as the symbol of the previous solar system connected with the 3rd ray. We might look at the 5-pointed star of initiation as a symbol for this 2nd major solar system. The number 2 and 5 are very closely related. the solar angels that are helping us so much have those two numbers prominently. They have a lot of love, and more is growing, and they're focusing on the mental plane, and they have developed mind to a great extent, having been trained under Sirius, which has a fifth race soul. So look, if you know the numbers, you can trace from number to number in these different entities because of the law of, well, maybe it's not a law, but through numerical affinity. Now, just think of it. Your throat center brings you what ray? Third, right? And yet the throat center is the fifth major center from below. Base, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat. So the number 5 by numerical affinity is related to this center of intelligence, to Brahma, and to the previous solar system in which Brahma reigned. So, it's a bit like if we're a kid and we're supposed to connect the dots, and we see, there's a 5 and there's a 5. So I make a line from 5 to 5. And I can do that with all the numbers. And it does reveal to us some pretty interesting relations, which we might overlook otherwise. As I've been saying, when it comes to the different planes here, we have the lower fires split and the mental fire unifying, and the highest fire remote and in the background, but slowly emerging. So, I'm not, it's been a while since I've looked at this when I worked on it. And I'm beginning to say, well, what did I mean by that? Okay. But I have talked about the way the fires of the different planes, they split. Like, for instance, if you're looking at your mental body, 4 divisions in it relate to fire by friction, and 3 divisions relate to solar fire. And our job is to bring the solar fire into the area of fire by friction. That's what we call soul infusion. That's what we call this higher power coming down and in and through a lower power. And this is one of our big tasks. So I guess I'm talking about splits and things being unitary, and I'm beginning to see why I did that. The first category is before there is awareness of the soul. The next category is when there is awareness of the soul and the electric fire is beginning to be a mono, M-O-N, monolithic thing, and start to come down through these split fires. And then in the next solar system, I don't know how many fires will be split, but the spirit itself might be split into 4 lower subplanes of the monad and 3 higher. And it's very obscure, but in this book, Cosmic Fire, he does tell us how we move from subplane to subplane, even on the monadic plane. Well, oh goodness. This is like amazing progress here. In the divine spark or monadic fire, is the divine spark or monadic fire the fire of the first ray? Yes, it would seem it is so. During the next solar system, we can expect the divine spark to manifest as a duality. And the whole question of how we individualize and become, we become animal, we are animal man, and we enter the human kingdom, that's going to be raised up to the monadic level, we are told. It's not going to involve the mind so much as it involves the monadic plane. And there may be something to do with our planetary logos as the higher part of the monad finds its placement in aspects of the planetary logos. I admit, dear, I can hear you. Hello.
I'm sorry.
To you, it's okay. It was in
I'm sorry.
finish.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. All right. So, does the divine spark come from the cosmic mental plane? And what is the origin of the monads? These are really big questions because the monad has a lot of experience before it even comes into our solar system. And the nature of that experience, it has to do with being part of a greater monad which diversifies into monads which have smaller and smaller scope. Does the monad come from the central spiritual sun or from the heart of the sun? Maybe both, depending on what type of monad it is. If the monad is that which has its home within the sun, and that's Initiation Human and Solar, page 196, from what aspect of the sun does the monad come? It is obviously obvious that the monad does not come from the physical sun. Now remember, I'm talking about this because you are the monad. You are the one, and that one is identical, finally, in all beings. The central spiritual sun is a much better candidate than the physical sun for the origin of the monad. But even then, the monad has its origin on much, much higher levels. And we might say that it is already part of the universal logos and descends with fellow monads in groups, and the groups become differentiated on the way down. So look, what's the point of it all here? In a way, the whole universe is yours. And from the very beginning, you are the theme and the being that is the life of the entire universe. Now, your scope gets smaller and smaller, and maybe, I can show you a diagram which makes that clear or clearer, and I'll try to remember to actually show it to you, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Okay, let's see. I would like to, I'm not sure that I can do that the way I want to do it. Aha, there we go. There, that's the one. And I'll it's a very small picture right now, and I'll try to make it bigger before I show it to you, but maybe I can't. And if I can't, I'll just show it to you. So here it is. You see how things begin in big circles and begin to differentiate on the way down into denser and denser matter until there comes a point where we might say, oh yeah, this is the human monad. But remember that many monads together create these higher vehicles, and they do descend from great holes into smaller and smaller units, with the essence being the same. So we've been through a big trip already. And even before we decide to take that pilgrimage, which brings us into the very lowest levels of the cosmic physical plane, we're already very experienced in having participated in larger aspects of the universe. Now, I think DK talks about that just a little bit, that how old the monad really is. Well, really, it's as old as the appearance of the universal logos, which it is. So here's another way of saying it. You are the whole thing. You are the essence of the universe. And when division enters the picture, there is differentiation and a smaller and smaller scope as one descends into what we call prakriti, or matter. Now I have kind of a, I don't know even how to get rid of this, but I guess I'm going to just let that go. We're reaching the end here, folks. I've diversified on a lot of subjects. Where does the monad come from? See, ultimately, your monad, ultimately, you as a monad, are members of one of these three triangles. Now, obviously, that's not the beginning. You are a monad of the Father, of the child, and or of the Holy Spirit. Your free monadic home is one of these three. And the subray of the monad is what we normally call, the subray of the liberated monad is what we normally call our monadic ray, and that can be any one of the seven, at least in our present solar system. So, I want to make these principles, or at least call attention to them. You have the entire range of the universe, our universe, lying before you. And it's just a question of regathering the power to realize yourself as the life behind all this variety, the life from which all this variety arose. It's a different conception of the self, but a book like Cosmic Fire will help us understand it. Let's see. Well, there's, I tell you what, I'm not going to, there's just a little bit more in this blue section. And we've asked, where does the monad come from? And in terms of our planet, it comes from one of the, and our solar system, it comes from one of the three major centers on the logoic plane. Now, that's only its temporary resting place, its temporary point of fixation on the cosmic physical plane. It really, you have experience which has taken you through all kinds of cosmic planes, and you will reascend via the line which you took deeper and deeper into your pilgrimage. I'm asking, are the sparks of mind different from divine sparks? The term sparks of mind is used in relation, usually, to the fragment of itself, which the solar angels shoot down onto the higher mental plane and into animal man at the moment of individualization. The spark of mind is more a solar angelic projection. The term divine sparks has a distinctly monadic relation. And what does it say about them? They are sparks of mind hanging from the flame and by the thinnest thread of Thohat. Whatever we want to make about that sentence, it's all about cosmic electricity. So, you are you've been nurtured in your thinking, and you're becoming an individual by the spark of mind, which the solar angel gave to you. But you are a divine spark. And that divine spark comes from a very high level in the universe. And then I ask the question, may it be then that the sparks of mind are related to the presence of the solar angels in man, in animal man, making him a human being, whereas the divine sparks are related to monadic fire. Well, these are speculations. I think they're interesting. There's just a little bit more to go here. Could the human monad come from the heart of the sun or from the central spiritual sun? And the central spiritual sun is considered as the spirit or monadic aspect of the solar logos. And it has its home on the cosmic monadic plane. Now, where is that? We have a little bit of a map here, and here, up here, is the cosmic monadic plane with all these great super lives. And it may be that in terms of the super system, our monads are coming from here, and yet that's not the origin. The origin is still much higher. How can we be the one and yet be divided from other monads? That's a mystery, but I think it is so. The true monad, the origin of the true monad, maybe I should always capitalize the word monad, is much higher than even the central spiritual sun. And I say that the ray of the absolute coming from the super universal worlds, basically the monad is a part of that, and flashes forth into that being we call the universal logos, but that's another class. It's the beginning of this very, very high levels of our universe. When we talk about the hub of the wheel, that's the central spiritual sun. And it ruled by Libra in a way. And Libra is interesting because it's the sign of peace. And yet Shambhala is the only place of pure and perfect peace on our planet. So peace and Libra and the monad, they all go together. Okay. Oh, and there's another interesting thing, but I'm not going to get into that right now. It's all about the next solar system after the sixth, and will it be in the eternal now? You know, it's an interesting question, but we can't get into too much diversity. So, and I will carry down a little bit of what we've been doing, you know, and this is the beginning and the end. So let us see how this works. This is the 30-second program, and I'll end it here for our discussion, and we'll call this the end of the on 25, and I think we're still on page 44, I would guess. At least what we will have is the foundation of the system. At least we'll get that. The other things you're much more familiar with. So it's still page 44, 30-second program, and program number 32. And then the next one will be the beginning on 2 October 20, still on page 44, and program 33. And this is the 32nd program, and that will be the 33rd program. All right. A diversity of thoughts, I realize. And basically, we've talked about the difference between the spark of mind and the divine spark. We've talked about the five-pointed star. We've talked about the origin of the monad. Is it the cosmic mental plane, or is it really somehow the cosmic monadic plane? We've talked about the numbers that are connected with the three major solar systems and the names of the gods in the Hindu version that are connected with the three major solar systems. I didn't say much about the triangle, the five-pointed star, and the seven-pointed star, but I think the seven-pointed star can be considered a symbol for the coming solar system. And he does talk about that in relation to the higher initiations, maybe of Chohanship, something of that nature. Let's see, is there anything else here? We've talked about the different ways of looking at the quaternary, in this case, the macrocosmic quaternary mostly, but we've referred to the human quaternary. We've discussed the difference between a sheath and a principle, one being a receptacle and the other being an energy working through that receptacle. We've discussed the different ways of looking at the principles and their vehicles, and we pointed out the page numbers beginning around page 260 of this book, where different points of view are given about how to number the principles. Some of them not even reaching the etheric plane, and some of them very, very high. That will be interesting when we get there, and I may say a few things about it, because even though we don't reach the page yet, what I try to do is touch in a little bit about items of knowledge which are coming, because they do enhance our present understanding. I think that is pretty much what we have discussed this evening here in Europe, and different time for you. The whole question of the divine spark and the spark of mind in the individualization process, a little bit of that was taken up, and I maybe didn't define what the heart of the sun is, but it is the soul nature of our solar logos, and for some reason, that great logos has its own massive solar angel, which is, by analogy, of higher degree of evolution than the solar logos himself. So as the solar logos is, as the solar logos is to its solar angel, so we, human man, are to our solar angel. And the interesting thing is that our solar angels may be representatives of the great solar angel, which is the solar angel for the solar logos. Well, that's why the Tibetan works with what he calls meticulous entirety. And we've defined that sometimes, and it's in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, around page 394. He somehow knows the details, and he puts these details into patterns so we get a better idea of what the great science of relations tells us about our local solar system, local cosmos, local supercosmos, etc. We get a pretty good idea that we might not get if we were not students of this particular book. So that's all I'm going to say right now, probably more than enough. And if you have thoughts or questions, this is the time to review them.
Okay, Michael. Going back to the discussion on the various ways in which principles are numbered, Jesse wrote, perhaps an example of the diamond mind.
Yeah, the diamond, sometimes they call it diamond mind and sometimes diamond soul. There's a lot of different facets, I guess that's the word, and different cuts that represent, sort of different perspectives. And I would say that in a way, by the time we reach the antechamber of the fourth initiation, we possess the diamond soul, which reflects in a mind which can see multiple perspectives. Now, I think what we have to do is find a few good ones, ones that we can rely upon as presenting a useful picture of the arrangement. When we get to it, and maybe sooner than later, we will see that some of the enumerations of principles go very, very high and way beyond what humanity is at the moment. And yet they are still considered related to the microcosm. So there are many facets, speaking of a well-cut diamond, of perception. And I think probably the analogy is useful, is good. Um, the DK has that kind of mind where he can see from all the different angles, and we're learning a little bit about that, maybe a little bit. And it is surprising, when we, with our concrete mind, have locked in a certain configuration and we think, well, this is how it is. And then he comes along and gives us a different angle on things and reveals a different facet of the subject. So our mind has to be exacting when we work with DK, and yet not rigid but flexible. Diamond mind, diamond soul.
And then Jessie just added that she was referring to DK's teaching method.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm talking about that also. But of course, he is also giving us a different angle upon the subject. If he leaves out the entire etheric physical plane in one enumeration, leaves out the monadic plane in another enumeration, and goes into great group systems in another enumeration, it's not just a difference in perspective, talking about the same thing. He is looking at different facets. I keep on using that diamond word, okay? He's looking at different facets, which are different ways of, actual different ways of counting and of noticing, not all at once, but a certain range within the whole gamut of principles. We notice different ranges of particular principles, and he also gives us those. And he's teaching flexibly, but he's also identifying different things. He's identifying different ranges of items and different vehicles and principles than we have been considering in the past.
Next, Alexander asks, in relation to the ruling chakras, should we distinguish between chakras and centers?
Well, the words are used, as you know, interchangeably. There is this, in esoteric healing, this idea of the condensation of an etheric chakric energy into a gland. And sometimes those glands may be called centers. But for me, we can center our life in a particular chakra, but I usually consider the two terms as virtually interchangeable. Now, in every life, you operate with a focus on different of these chakras or centers. For instance, yeah, okay. I'll turn to page 170, approximately, where these triangles of chakras are listed. And let's just say that we tend to, as we progress, move up the numbers. We may be, oh, you
Would
want
you like
see
to
it?
change your screen share?
Why not? All right, sure. There we go. All right, so here is man controlled from the mental plane, and he's going to be focusing on these three, base of spine, heart, and throat. But when he advances in his evolution, the chakras will change, and At least temporarily, the base of spine will not be involved. The heart and throat will again be involved, and the four lesser head centers will be involved. And notice that here the word is center, but they do mean the chakra. I'm quite sure of that. And then eventually, let us say we're going to be taking the third initiation. Heart and throat are sustained, but we add to the centers within the head, let us say, 3 more. And our focus takes them in as well. So for all practical purposes, at least, I tend to equate the two. And one could make a study of when he uses the word center, when he uses the word chakra. But it's a bit like planetary logos and heavenly man. You can work hard to make distinctions between them. But again, for all practical purposes, he uses those terms interchangeably. So it's always good to know when terms are being used interchangeably or when there is a real significant difference. And for my work anyway, I consider them pretty identical. I mean, you know, we talk about the head center, okay? But that is the head chakra. And it's the big one, and it's also the heart in the head center, which is a heart in the head chakra, which is the major chakra there in the head center. So for the time being, until I see a good reason to look for the distinctions, I'll keep them pretty equal, just as the planetary logos and heavenly man are pretty equal. Okay.
And Jesse continued, facets in essence can also be hierarchically related levels, macro to micro or vice versa.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's a good point. You know, in any, I suppose, cutting of a gem, there's some kind of hierarchy of organization. Boy, talk about a pressureful task, you know, to make something so exacting. It involves Vulcan, it involves Venus, it definitely involves Capricorn, where the beauty of Venus is the hierarchical planet. And when it comes to Vulcan, you know, the ruler of Taurus, bringing in the fourth ray, I imagine the amount of stress involved in assuring the best of possible cuts is very intense. I used to walk through the Diamond District in New York on my way to the Arcane School, because once I got off the train from New Jersey, it was about two miles across the city, and I took different paths, and it was interesting to see the people that were involved in this process. So the hierarchicalization of the different facets is an interesting subject. Okay.
And Vicky asks, do the various monads living on Earth have their quote-unquote home on one of the sacred planets in the solar system based on ray affinity? For example, third ray monad, a projection of Saturn, fourth ray monad, a projection of Mercury, and so on. Then every planet in our solar system would have a living impulse or expression on Earth where the physical manifestation is worked out.
Well, you know, to that kind of question, I think I would answer both yes and no. First of all, Earth is not one of those planets which endures throughout the Mahamanvantara, whereas Venus is, and maybe the other sacred planets are as well. I've come to the temporary conclusion that every one of us has a kind of origin, a planetary origin within a sacred planet, and that we've been transferred from a sacred planet to the earth, which is still non-sacred, and all for specific purposes, so we can bring in the quality of the planet of origin. Now, here comes the other part of it. I believe that all planets must have all 7 rays. Every planet must have 7 types of monads, of which maybe one type is most representative. Look at the Earth. It has 7 types on the monadic plane. I expect that that is also the case with all sacred planets, and it's the case with the sun, which is primarily on the 2nd ray in its soul, and maybe in its ultimate monadic nature on the 2nd ray, but which contains the septonate in this particular solar system. For instance, I tend to believe that the Tibetan and the Buddha are monads from Mercury. Of course, you know, they have an origin prior to that, but at least in terms of the sacred planets, that Master Kutumi and the Christ are monads from Venus. I think, however, that it would be a little bit monochromatic to say that all monads from a particular planet are of the same ray quality. They do represent the quality of the planet, but in 7 diversified ways, I would say. So, and because remember that there are 2 monadic rays, one a series of sub-rays on the monadic plane, and the other the rays of the liberated monad on the logoic level. And in some cases, you can differentiate these and find out what they are, and in other cases, the book is still sealed. So I tend to say, yes, we are from sacred planets. When we come to a planet that is like the Earth, which does not endure throughout the solar system, and that we can be representing our particular sacred planet of origin in 7 or 3 diverse ways. That's the conclusion that I've come to up to this time. All knowledge is relative, and we have our conclusions, which can be modified the further we think and study and realize.
And next, Noeline writes, chakra is Sanskrit, so I think it is just a matter of 2 languages for the same thing.
It does mean wheel, you know, it's one of the things. Wheel, center, you know, you kind of study what DK does with the language. And he's not always rigid in the designation. Sometimes he'll call your attention to the fact, like I am using these words with great specificity. I have given special attention to the use of these words, you know. So then you really want to have your ears perked up and your eyes open and look for a differentiation. But in general, I think there's a lot of, I won't call it inexactitude, but I'll just call it approximation going on between various terms. Now, the term heavenly man is interesting because it doesn't only mean a planetary logos. Most often it does, but there are other types of heavenly men of greater and lesser scope. Now, for instance, the grand heavenly man is the solar logos, or the grand man of the heavens. A normal heavenly man is a planetary logos. And in a way, a chain lord or a globe lord within a planetary manifestation is also a kind of heavenly man. So what we have to do is look at a term and see on how many different levels it may be applied. But yes, one is Sanskrit, as you say, and the other is the English term. And sometimes we use the word wheel. And sometimes when we look at the petals, we have circles of petals, yes, but we also have tiers, Tiers, of petals. And they mean the same thing, except the idea of the tier seems to be a little bit progressive. It is a circle, but it's a progressive circle. And the word circle doesn't necessarily tell you at what level of elevation it is operating. So let's watch the language indeed.
Okay, and now Ishtar has written, what do you think of a person's astrological energies becoming more prominent in the chakras as a person grows closer to egoic integration?
I think that the higher aspect of the sign, the constellation sign, will become more prominent. But I think you can also see the lower aspects working out in relation to the chakra in a less developed person. So I believe, sometimes he talks about the higher part of the personality ray and the lower part of the personality ray. I think there are, with signs, higher and lower meanings. Now, for instance, one page I always like to turn to is the following, and I'll actually try to show it to you this time. It is on page 332 and 333 of Esoteric Astrology. And, okay, no, it doesn't have that many pages. Okay, I'm in the wrong book. Now I can get to the right book. Yes, and I'll show it to you. You'll be familiar probably with this particular chart. And when you study it, basically what you see is not that the sign changes, but the expression of the tendency of the sign changes. From, let's say, in Taurus, instinctual selfishness and selfish desire, up to the potential of illumined living, and the different lights change. So I would say that the chakras can be affected by a particular sign of the zodiac continuously, but that there are higher and lower tendencies within these signs, and depending upon the quality of the form, such tendencies will be drawn out or suppressed. When you're dealing with an individual who has not done the purificatory work and is conditioned by mass consciousness, then the way the sign appears will be thus and so, and it will not be the highest potentials of the sign. But when purification and development and refinement have been attended to, then the higher potentials of the sign will be drawn out. I mean, signs are entities, you know, they are beings, especially the constellations from which they come. And they will, like all beings, have their high and their low aspects. So I think we find the signs in all chakras, but the degree of elevation of the qualities will change according to the condition of the form and the part of the sign that is evoked by that reconditioned form.
Next, Joe writes, on page 170, number 6, Spiritual Man, to the fifth initiation, notes item C as the two many-petaled lotus. Does this perhaps point in the direction of the splitting of the monad that you spoke of?
The two many-petaled lotuses are basically the head center and the ajna center with its 96 divisions, 48 on each side, and summing, you know, to 49 in a way on each side, 49 being an important number of completion. And in some of the Hindu books, even the Alta major center, the Alta chakra, has 96 or 98 divisions. It's right up there with the Ajna center. This splitting of the monad that I'm talking about is a matter for the sixth initiation and beyond. So there is early development of the two many-petaled lotuses, and I think it takes us to the, let me just check here what it takes us to. Whoop, that's not correct. 170. Yes, it takes us to the fifth initiation. The 7 head centers, which are internal to the head, they are etheric centers or master centers internal to the head. And then the series of ajna petals, ajna centers, there's a whole series of them, and somehow we have a book which helps us understand why the Tibetans have this sort of feathered arc in the hats that they wear. It has to do with the ajna series of centers. If I could find it, well, that's getting off on another subject, you know, but let's see where we are right now. Yeah. It's getting off on another subject. I wonder if in Tuya's work there is something here. If I find it, I'll let you know. Maybe it's in the other one. I think it is in the other one. So now I'm going to look for this. Okay, and here it is demonstrated. And I'm going to see, I'm having trouble bringing this down, Michael. Oh, maybe, there we go. Okay. this, I forget the name of the book. Here it is. But and now, here it is, but can I get this to manifest properly? My screen is paused. I don't want that. Oh, I'm having trouble. I'm looking at it, but I'm trying to get it so that you can look at it, but I'm having a little trouble.
We are seeing the ajna system on your screen.
You are? Oh,
Yes, we are. We see it.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Notice the names of these chakras. They are unusual. The manasic chakra, the Indu or Buddhi chakra, the Maha Ananda, or is it Anada? That's what it is. Or Maha Anada. Then comes the Nirvanic chakra, and all leading to the top of the head, the Sahasrara chakra. But before that comes the Guru chakra. So this is another system, but they are, very powerful chakras and are considered to be part of the ajna system of chakras. So, and on top of this, on top of these chakras that are, as it were, above the head in that arc, that feathered arc, there are chakras within the head as well, and chakras within the body. Now, Malvin Artley, has written that book called 1,000 Points of Light, and he's a very fifth-ray fellow, and he's taken up the major chakras, the minor chakras, and the minute chakras. And maybe some of this is articulated by him. But we can understand that there are going to be relationships here to the spiritual triad, the monastic vehicle, which will eventually be created when the solar angel leaves, the Buddhic vehicle and Buddhi, the Atmic vehicle and Atma, because Atma is called the nirvanic plane. So this must be the one that has to do with Atma. And then there are others. I can't really even tell you what this Guru chakra is all about, but at least we end with something called the Sahasrara, which is what we normally call the center at the top of the head, the 1,000-petaled lotus. So the whole thing is more, shall we say, more complicated than we may have imagined, and that's why the Tibetan kind of demurred when it came to that question by Assagioli. He never really gave him an answer when Assagioli questioned the structure of the head center. It's a lot more complex than we imagined. So the two many-petaled lotuses, well, probably for practical purposes, they are the center at the top of the head and the 96 or 98 divided ajna. Along, those are the two many, plus the 7 centers within the head. I'm not thinking that they are the ones above the head, because there are master control centers that are ruled by Vulcan. It's very interesting. the Great Bear rules such internal centers, head centers, in the one about whom naught may be said. And Vulcan, with its powerful first ray, rules the centers within the head, and it's analogous to the Great Bear. As a matter of fact, one of the decanates, where Cancer is concerned, is the Great Bear decanate, and it is ruled by Vulcan. So these things all fit together and make the head center a tremendous study, but probably destined to be studied during the work in the advanced school, I would say. Okay.
Next.
Now, yeah, and I can't, next, and I can't, I just want to, here it is. Okay. My screen sharing is paused. I don't know why, but anyway, let's just see.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So Vicky writes, on several occasions, you have made an attempt at deriving the occult and sacred number 14, which is a harmonic of this, our secondary solar system, and which figured so prominently in ancient Egypt.
Egypt, yeah.
What?
And
What?
he tells us, wait just one second. He tells us that the 14 has a lot to do with the combining of the two bears, the Great Bear and the Little Bear. And yes, I've said that Egypt, it was prominent for Egypt, but it has to do with two different levels of septinates. One ruled by the Great Bear, one ruled by the Lesser Bear. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
So the question is, what are your thoughts on the derivation, meaning, and significance of the number 14, apart from the combination of the Great Bear and Little Bear?
Well, I think, that the whole universe is septenarily organized. And I believe that we always have a structure called microcosm and macrocosm. There is a macrocosmic 7 and a microcosmic 7. There are 7 rules for the microcosm, 7 rules for the macrocosm when we come to the rules for initiation. So I believe that these two septinates are dual, and they are always interacting, and that they basically are, the 14 is formed by that interplay between macrocosm and microcosm. There may be other, the number sums to 5, and it is the image of the pyramid, the 1 and the 4, because you can break the numbers apart. So we have the point of synthesis, which always synthesizes the cross, the 1 and 4 together, which make the 5. So basically, we're talking about one of the dynamics of initiation. Also, when we combine 3 of those 14s, we get the 42 assessors in Egypt, who asked in a very pointed way the answers to questions which would determine the destiny and even the initiatory status of the defunct individual. So it was the process of self-examination. That's about as far as I can go with it. I think one can make a study of how the 7 and the 14 show up, but I believe that if you divide macrocosm and microcosm and then combine the septinates of both, you get that number. So it has something to do with the interplay of the higher 7 with the lower 7. And basically, it's the relationship of the father to the son. The Great Bear is the father aspect, and the son is the, of course, that's the middle aspect. And, you know, we can also carry it still farther into the 21, but I think at first we have to get this microcosmic, macrocosmic relationship between the sevens, which will give us the 14. I don't think we should, at this point, examine the 14 apart from those septonates, or at least I think the septonates are very important in examining the significance of the 14. And even the fact that he's given us two sets of rules, each one of which has, 14? I think so. Is itself very interesting. Let's see, how many rules? Let's see, is it it's 14 rules, isn't it? In each one of those. That comes to the 28, comes to the 1, comes to the ohm. Now we're going to get into numerology if we start combining these things. But again, there is a relationship right within the human energy system of 7 master centers to 7 subsidiary centers. Again, the 14 is very important, but it does extend towards 21, which taken together gives us the 22, and eventually we'll have to complete the 14 with the 21, which becomes the 22. Maybe you have some ideas about how that number shows up, but certainly in our esotericism, it's showing up constantly in the comparison of macro and micro.
And since it is been just over 2 hours, perhaps this is the last question that we can respond to.
What do we have there?
Ishtar writes, and this goes back to the Ajna Center map that you had up just a little bit ago.
Right.
The blue Bindu is the first chakra area of the Ajna. I take is also called the blue pearl, which one sees within or outer during meditative states. And going on, Guru chakra, from what Sadhguru explains, is the all-knowing energy point that gives access to Akashic levels, and they can tune into anyone's mind. That's a surprise regarding the Great Bear connection to Cancer. Where may I find this information in AAB's books?
You don't. You don't find it. That's Muktananda, you know, and basically you'll have to rely upon, not every author is going to be writing about every subject. DK has his own particular approach to the functions of the chakras, and they usually have to do with rays and planets and the way they play out in the dynamics of initiation. That's kind of his province. As for what Muktananda may say about it, okay, it's a different approach. And as far as I know at least, DK is not getting into that. It's quite a different system in a way. And I think one would be surprised at how contrasting are the Tibetan methods of interpreting the interrelation of the chakras compared to the more Hindu methods. As a matter of fact, the colors are very, very different, and some of the functions purported are different. So, you know, you have to take from the particular teachers what they've said, not expect every teacher to be commenting on all things. DK's province is pretty much that of esoteric psychology, where the esoteric rheology, esoteric astrology, and the esoteric study of the centers in terms of rays and astrology and initiatory potential is undertaken. That's what you're going to find with him. And a lot of it scattered throughout the books, and a lot of it found in esoteric healing. Okay. Now we have different, oh my. Did we do Joe Garso rather, Vicky Nas, Joe Garso?
Yes, we did.
And number 6, spiritual man to the, yeah, right, okay. Right, the splitting of the monad, that is a very high, we hardly know what our submonadic ray is. We hardly can deal with the spiritual triad. You know, study page 176 and 177 for the 9 choices of triadal rays. We're hardly there. And so when it comes to the very highest level of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost and the liberated monad, okay, that lies ahead. And that is an ultimate monadic consideration, but the Buddha and the Christ are dealing with that kind of structure as they prepare over a long period of time for the 7th initiation. So maybe, I don't know, maybe next time that's it. That's it. Okay, we pretty well have covered it, haven't we, Michael? So that's good. Okay, now we began with the potency of the great invocation as given through its will aspect. The rule of evil now must end, and let's close with the great invocation that we are more familiar with. And I'll just try to get there quickly, and there it is. And for those of you who are like myself, occasionally forgetting verses, this can be useful. And we'll say the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, thank you for being with us a little longer maybe tonight and tomorrow morning, Destiny of the Nations. It will be a broadcast. We've been working on the country Italy, and I think we've gone as far as looking at the indirect astrological influences. We've discussed the soul ray and its relations, and the personality ray and its relations to different nations. And as always, we'll have the opportunity to think of yourself, your gifts, and your relation to your own nation, and what is the attempt of your nation as it joins the Comity of Nations to express its soul, and how can you help with that process. So we'll have this up on Makara before long, along with the other programs, and I appreciate your presence. And what I'll do is close the recording, and then Michael will close the actual program. So here goes the recording, and